Hello everyone, wishing you all a wonderful day. Today, we're diving into a heartfelt story about Yuri's first steps into his startup journey, and the moment a single phone call completely changed everything. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming episodes. On the very first morning of his new startup life, Yuri found himself sitting alone in a small, sunlit room that didn't feel like much, yet somehow felt like a beginning. The wooden desk in front of him was old, its surface scratched and dented from years of use. But today those marks almost looked like stories carved into the wood. Stories he hoped one day he could add to. There was no fancy office here, no large team, no assistants filtering calls, no title of director hanging over his head anymore. It was just him, a laptop that hummed a little too loudly, and a dream he stubbornly refused to let die. Soft footsteps approached. Tu Tieu pushed open the door gently, holding a warm cup of coffee in both hands. She set it down in front of him, as if she was placing something fragile. "Here," she said quietly. "Drink before it gets cold. You're going to need the energy." Yuri looked up, eyes tired but grateful. "Do you really think I can do this? Like, this whole thing?" Instead of answering right away, she reached out and brushed a tiny speck of dust from his shoulder. Her touch was light, familiar, steadying. "I don't think," she said, looking him straight in the eyes. "I know you can." Somehow, her voice lifted him more than any caffeine ever could. Hope tasted a little stronger that morning, but that hope was tested fast. The next few weeks were brutal. Yuri sent out emails until his fingers ached. He pitched his idea to anyone willing to listen. Some meetings went okay, most didn't. He walked in with optimism and walked out with a different flavor of rejection every time. Sometimes polite, sometimes blunt, sometimes the kind that lingered in his mind long after he left the room. One late evening, the exhaustion finally caught up. Yuri returned home with his shoulders slumped, eyes dull with defeat. He didn't even take off his shoes before collapsing onto the sofa. He didn't speak, didn't move. Tu Tieu appeared beside him with a small bowl of warm soup, holding it out like a lifeline. "It's okay," she whispered. "A bad day doesn't mean a bad future." Yuri closed his eyes, letting his head fall back. "I feel like I'm failing at everything." "No," she replied instantly, without hesitation. "You're not failing, you're learning." Her presence, quiet, gentle, unwavering, kept him from breaking apart completely. A few days later, Mother Nia came by. Yuri's mother stepped into the room, holding a home-cooked meal and something else, a plain white envelope. She set it down on the table with the weight of someone who had made up her mind long before arriving. "Yuri," she began, "take this. It's some money to help you get back on your feet. Or," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "or come back to the company. Your office is still there. The title is still there. You don't have to do this to yourself." Yuri stared at the envelope, hands tightening but never reaching for it. "Mom, I appreciate it," he said quietly, "but I can't." "You can't?" she repeated, her tone sharp. "Or you won't." He took a deep breath, steadying the storm in his chest. "I won't," he said firmly. "I want to build something with my own hands. I want a life with Tu Tieu, a life that doesn't depend on the family business." The room fell silent. Mother Nia's expression softened, but her voice trembled slightly. "Do you understand how hard this path will be?" "I do." Yuri's voice didn't waver. "And I choose it anyway." For a long moment, his mother just looked at him, pain, pride, and fear all tangled in her eyes. Finally, she stood up and rested a hand on his shoulder. "Then fight for it," she said softly, "and don't give up halfway." The days that followed were a blur of hard work. Yuri studied until late into the night. He rewrote proposals, practiced his pitch in front of the mirror, tried new angles, adjusted strategies, and forced himself to keep going through every rejection that arrived in his inbox. And every night, Tu Tieu was there, dropping a snack on his desk when she noticed he hadn't eaten, putting a glass of water in front of him when he was too focused to notice his own thirst, or simply sitting beside him, flipping through her own notes, offering silent company. Her presence reminded him that even when his ideas felt shaky, he wasn't building alone. Then it happened. One sunny afternoon, Yuri's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and froze. It was a company he had pitched to weeks ago, the same company that had told him, "Not right now." With his heart hammering in his chest, he picked up the call. "Hello, this is Yuri speaking." A professional voice on the other side replied, "We've reviewed your updated proposal. We'd like to schedule another meeting. Are you available this week?" At the window, Tu Tieu turned around instantly when she heard Uri's sharp inhale. "Uri, what happened? Who was that?" Uri's eyes were brighter than she'd seen in months. "They want to meet again," he said, almost breathless. "They want to talk." Tu Tieu gasped and rushed toward him. They hugged tightly, anxious laughter mixing with relief, like two people who had just witnessed a small miracle. The second meeting was different. Uri walked in with more confidence than before. His voice was steady. His ideas were clearer. The weeks of struggling had shaped him, sharpened him. When he finished speaking, the client leaned back, thoughtful, then smiled. "All right," the man said. "Let's start with a small project. Show us what you can do." For a second, Uri forgot how to breathe. He walked out of that building feeling 10 kilos lighter. Days later, the confirmation email arrived. Contract approved. He didn't even try to calm himself down. He sprinted home as fast as he could. "Tu Tieu!" he shouted before the door fully closed. "Where are you?" She rushed out from the kitchen, alarmed. "What's wrong?" Uri grabbed her by the waist, lifted her off the ground, and spun her in pure, uncontrollable joy. "We got it!" he laughed. "Our first contract. It's small, but it's real. Someone believes in my work." Her laughter filled the room, warm and bright. "I told you," she said, cupping his face. "I always believe in you, even when you don't." That night, while Yuri was still floating in the excitement of his first real win, his phone rang again. It was Mother Nghia. He stepped onto the balcony to answer, the cool air brushing against his face. "Mom," he said, "I have good news." She didn't speak right away. Instead, he heard her inhale sharply, as if bracing herself. When he told her about the contract, her voice wavered. "Uri, I'm proud of you," she whispered. "More than you know." Uri closed his eyes, letting the moment settle inside him. It wasn't just approval, it was acknowledgement, recognition. A mother's acceptance that her son had taken a road she couldn't choose for him, but one he was strong enough to walk. He leaned on the balcony railing, watching through the window as Tu Tieu prepared dinner. She was singing quietly to herself, completely unaware that he was standing there, heart full in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. That's when he realized something important. The contract wasn't the victory. The real victory was knowing he wasn't doing this alone. Over the next few weeks, Yuri buried himself in work. The project was small, but he treated it like it was the most important contract in the world. Tu Tieu helped whenever she could, organizing files, listening to his rehearsed presentations, even pointing out small details he hadn't noticed. Sometimes she'd gently tug his sleeve and say, "Break, now, 5 minutes, no arguments." Other times she'd simply bring him a cup of tea and sit beside him, silently reminding him that he was supported, that he didn't need to carry everything alone. Uri was always the one with big visions, big risks, big goals. But Tu Tieu was the one who quietly kept him human. And that balance, though invisible to others, was everything. The client's feedback came in faster than expected. A few revisions, a few adjustments, nothing too heavy, but enough to keep Yuri on his toes. He wanted everything to be perfect. Not just good enough, not just acceptable, but genuinely great. He wanted this first project to become the foundation of his niche, something he could point to and say, "This is who I am. This is the standard I deliver." Tu Tieu stayed patient even when he worked until midnight. She set alarms to remind him to stretch. She placed snacks on the table with handwritten notes like, "Your brain needs fuel," or "Proud of you, genius." And sometimes, when she found him asleep with his head on the desk, she'd drape a blanket around him before turning off the lights. It wasn't dramatic love. It was everyday love. The kind that builds a life quietly, piece by piece. When Uri finally submitted the final version of the project, he felt something shift inside him. Not relief, not pride, but certainty. For the first time, he didn't feel like someone who had left a comfortable life behind. He felt like someone who was truly building one. A few days later, an email arrived. The client was impressed, satisfied, happy with the results. Not only did they approve the project, they wanted to discuss another, slightly bigger one. Uri stared at the email for a long time. He didn't laugh, he didn't shout, he didn't even move. He just felt his throat tighten, his vision blur slightly. Progress. Slow, small, but real. One evening, he and Tu Tieu sat outside at their small wooden table, sharing dinner under a warm yellow light. The air smelled faintly of jasmine. It was one of those evenings that felt too calm, too gentle to belong to the same world where stress existed. Yuri picked up his chopsticks, paused, and said, "Tieu, do you ever get tired of this? Of supporting someone who's still struggling?" She blinked at him, surprised. "Where did that come from?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm dragging you into my chaos." Tu Tieu set her bowl down slowly. Then she reached forward and touched his hand. "Uri," she said softly, "I didn't fall in love with you because you were successful. I fell in love with you because you're you. And if you think I'm here because of comfort or security, then you really don't know how stubborn I am." He laughed, a breathy, relieved sound. Her eyes softened. "Besides," she added, "you're not dragging me, we're walking." Her words stayed in his chest for the rest of the night. Weeks passed again, each one busier than the last. Yuri worked, he improved, he learned. He fell and got up again. He wasn't magically successful overnight. No viral miracle, no sudden explosion of clients. But he was moving forward, one small step at a time. And sometimes, small steps were more real than big leaps. Then, something unexpected happened. One of Yuri's first clients recommended him to another company. Then that company recommended him to someone else. And slowly, almost quietly, Uri's name began circulating in a small corner of the industry. A tiny niche, but a niche nonetheless. Opportunities didn't flood in, but they trickled, enough to keep him going, enough to grow his confidence, enough to prove to himself and to his mother that his dream wasn't foolish. One evening after finishing work, Uri sat alone in the living room. The soft glow of the lamp lit the room, warm and comforting. Tu Tieu came out with 2 cups of hot tea. "You're thinking a lot again," she said. He smiled. "Yeah, what about?" Uri looked around their small but cozy space, the mismatched chairs, the soft blankets she loved, the potted plant that kept dying and coming back to life. "About how far we've come," he said, "and how far we still have to go." She sat beside him, leaning her shoulder against his. "We'll get there," she murmured. "Slowly, but we will." Yuri wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. He didn't feel lost anymore, or confused, or like a man who had walked away from stability. He felt like someone who had finally stepped onto the path meant for him. A path full of uncertainty, full of risks, full of hard days and harder nights, but also full of meaning, full of love, full of moments that made every struggle worth it. Uri didn't choose the easy path. He didn't choose the comfortable one. He didn't choose the guaranteed one. He chose the meaningful one. And with Tu Tieu by his side, he finally felt like he was building more than a career. He was building a future, a home, a life worth fighting for. A life that wasn't defined by titles or money or expectations, but by effort, courage, and the quiet strength of the person who never once let go of his hand. Uri begins his startup journey alone in a small, sunlit room, determined to build something of his own, despite leaving behind the safety of his family's company. The early weeks are brutal, endless rejections, exhausting days, and moments of doubt that nearly break him. Through it all, Tu Tieu stands by his side, offering quiet strength, encouragement, and daily support. Even when Uri's mother urges him to return to the family business, he chooses the harder but more meaningful path. After relentless effort, a company that once rejected him calls back, offering a second meeting. Uri secures his first small contract, proving that persistence does matter. With Tu Tieu's unwavering love and his mother's newfound pride, Uri realizes he's not just building a career, he's building a future, a home, and a life worth fighting for.